In my past life, I was the kind of guy who watched other people's weddings through a live stream. Yet in this life, I have been thrust directly into the global spotlight. Even on the day Nexus went public, the host introduced my journey from a reckless playboy to a legendary investor, repeatedly playing that infamous DNA live stream as the turning point of my career. Standing before the cameras in a sharp, tailored suit, I maintained a calm and distant smile, but only I knew the truth. The moment that truly changed everything was not one of those grand climactic scenes, but rather a single minute inside my car when I refused to answer a distress call from a dark alley. In that moment, I chose a business gala over playing the hero, and I chose myself over the stepping stone destiny someone else had written for me. Everyone eventually hits a fork in the road where one path leads to saving a princess and the other leads to meeting a visionary entrepreneur. And this time, I finally learned to vote for my own story. My final vision before the cold steel blade pierced my heart was not Isabella Montgomery's tears, but rather a look of pure relief on her face and the face of the man standing beside her. "Davis, thank you," she whispered. Ryan Harrison, my frenemy, ground his heel into my hand, his voice dripping with the contempt of a victor. "If you hadn't played your part so well as the perfect stepping stone, how could my love with Isabella ever look so grand?" Isabella leaned into his chest. Her eyes, which once looked at me with such tenderness, now held nothing but cold calculation. "Don't blame me, Davis," she said. "Blame yourself for being the heir to the Sullivan fortune. He is the one destined for greatness, not you. As for your family's multi-billion-dollar empire, do not worry. We will take good care of it for you. My family, my dignity, and my entire life have been reduced to nothing more than a grand sacrifice for their romance." In a surge of overwhelming hatred and regret, I exhaled my final breath. Then, my eyes snapped open to the screeching of tires tearing through the air. My assistant Leo's panicked voice immediately followed. "Mr. Sullivan Davis, are you okay? I just got a call saying Ms. Montgomery is trapped in an alley on the south side." I was back. I had returned to 3 years ago, to the very afternoon where this tragedy first began. Looking out the car window, the Chicago skyline felt both familiar and strange. My heart hammered against my ribs, not out of fear, but from the sheer ecstasy of a second chance mixed with a burning, vengeful rage. In my previous life, this was the exact phone call that sent me charging out of the car like a madman. I had rushed into that alley, convinced I was making a heroic entrance to save a damsel in distress. Instead, I walked straight into a trap they had rehearsed a dozen times. A group of thugs had worked in tandem with the former Special Forces hero, Ryan Harrison. They broke 2 of my ribs on the spot, turning me into the laughingstock of the city's elite. That was my grand debut, a pathetic, lovesick fool playing the villain in the opening act of my family's destruction. "Davis, we have to get there now," Leo urged, his voice growing more frantic. "If we wait any longer, Isabella might." I raised my hand to cut him off and leaned back against the leather seat, my voice calmer than it had ever been. "Leo, call the police." Leo froze, certain he had misheard me. "Mr. Sullivan, what did you just say?" I repeated myself, my voice low but carrying an undeniable weight. I said, "Call 911. Tell the police there's a gang fight in an alley on the south side and let them handle it. Then, turn the car around. We're going to the Grand Century Tower." "But Ms. Montgomery," Leo started to protest. I turned to him, my gaze as sharp as a blade. "Leo, my father hired you, and the Sullivan Group pays your salary. Are you going to listen to me, or to a woman who has absolutely nothing to do with me?" A chill ran down his spine as he trembled under the coldness in my eyes. He quickly pulled out his phone, not daring to ask another question. "Yes, sir. I will call the police and turn around immediately." As the car merged back into traffic, I left that alley and their carefully choreographed farce far behind. I closed my eyes, my mind racing. At 3 o'clock this afternoon, the Grand Century Tower was hosting a critical business gala. In my past life, I had skipped this event for Isabella Montgomery, missing my only chance to meet Mark Thompson. That man would eventually become one of the 3 titans of the American tech industry. But back then, he was just a struggling entrepreneur facing constant rejection and being ignored by everyone. Later, following Isabella's supposedly brilliant intuition, Ryan Harrison invested a mere $50,000 into Thompson's startup, Nexus. A decade later, that small change grew 1,000-fold, becoming the first cornerstone of Ryan's empire. I, the rightful heir to the Sullivan Group, had handed over a world-changing opportunity to someone else, all because of a woman. It was as pathetic as it was tragic. This time, I would be the one writing the script. Ryan, Isabella, let us see how much spark is left in your fairy tale romance once you lose your biggest benefactor. As for me, do not bother me. I am busy making money. At exactly 2:50 p.m., the car pulled up to the entrance of the Grand Century Tower. I straightened my suit collar and caught my reflection in the window. A young, slightly arrogant face stared back. This was the 23-year-old version of me, the Davis who had not yet lost his confidence to a hopeless love and a string of failures. It felt good to be back at this moment. "Davis, you seem different today," Leo whispered from behind. I ignored him and walked straight into the ballroom. The hall was a sea of evening gowns and tuxedos, with crystal chandeliers reflecting off champagne flutes. This was the heart of Chicago's high society. I did not dive into the crowd of fair-weather friends like I did in my past life. Instead, I scanned the room with a singular purpose. I quickly found him in an unnoticed corner, a middle-aged man in a faded plaid shirt and black-rimmed glasses, looking completely out of place in this den of luxury. He held a glass of champagne nervously, his eyes filled with uncertainty and dread about the future. That was Mark Thompson, the future founder of Nexus. I took a deep breath, grabbed 2 glasses of champagne, and walked toward him. "Mr. Thompson, it is a pleasure to meet you." He was visibly startled and instinctively adjusted his glasses as he looked at me in confusion. "I am sorry, and you are?" I smiled. "Davis Sullivan, from the Sullivan Group." I handed him the glass. "My father is Warren Sullivan." "Oh, Mr. Sullivan." Thompson's face flushed as he clumsily took the glass. "Hello, it is an honor. I have heard your name many times." His reaction was exactly what I expected. In his eyes, I was just a spoiled rich kid who knew nothing about business and certainly would not be interested in his project. I did not rush to explain my purpose, opting for small talk first. "Mr. Thompson, I hear you are working on a new social platform called Nexus?" His eyes lit up instantly, like a drowning man catching a lifeline. Yes, Mr. Sullivan. Nexus is an instant messaging platform built for the mobile era. The market potential is massive." He began to talk a mile a minute, terrified of missing this chance. I listened patiently and gave a slight nod. The idea is good, but is nowhere near enough. The fire in his eyes dimmed. "Not enough." I looked him in the eye and dropped 3 words: gaming, media, and e-commerce. "Mr. Thompson, you're standing on a gold mine, but you are too busy thinking about how to sell the rocks around the entrance." Thompson froze, his champagne glass trembling. He looked at me as if I were an alien. I had just described the blueprint he had only begun to visualize during his sleepless nights, ideas he had not even put into a business plan yet. And I, a 23-year-old playboy, had clarified the core of his vision with a single sentence. "Mr. Sullivan, he stammered. "I will invest $50 million, I said, cutting him off, in exchange for 20% of the company. Furthermore, every mall, hotel, and entertainment center under the Sullivan Group will prioritize Nexus as our primary partner for promotion. $50 million plus the full weight of Sullivan's offline resources." I threw it all at him. Thompson's breathing became erratic as he stared at me, desperate to confirm I was not joking. "There is only one condition," I said, raising a finger. "From this day forward, I, Davis Sullivan, am your sole angel investor. You must reject all other forms of funding until we reach Series A." In my previous life, this was when Ryan Harrison swooped in with a measly $50,000 to secure his spot on the rocket ship. This time, he would not even get near the door. "I agree," Thompson practically shouted, his face red with excitement. "Mr. Sullivan, no, Davis, thank you, truly." Just call me Davis, I said with a smile, patting his shoulder. Tomorrow, bring your team and a full business plan to the Sullivan Group headquarters. Let us turn the world upside down together. I turned and left, leaving a shivering, ecstatic Thompson behind. Step 1, complete. Soon after, my phone began to vibrate incessantly. I pulled it out to see Isabella Montgomery's name flashing across the screen with a dozen missed calls and a string of iMessages. Davis, where are you? I am so scared. Davis, I have been attacked. Why are you not coming to save me? Ryan got hurt trying to protect me. At least send some money for the medical bills. Davis, what is wrong with you? Do you not love me anymore? I read through them one by one, a cold sneer forming on my lips. Love? In my last life, I gave her my whole heart, only to have her drive a knife through it. Without a moment's hesitation, I blocked her number and deleted the contact. Then, I dialed a number that felt both familiar and distant. Dad, it is me, Davis. Warren Sullivan's voice came through, sounding as stern and exhausted as ever. What kind of trouble is it this time? How much do you need? In his mind, every call from me was just to clean up Isabella's messes. I'm not asking for money, Dad, I said steadily. I just personally closed a $50 million investment deal. I want to present a new strategic plan to you and the board tomorrow. There was a long silence on the other end. Finally, with a tone of disbelief, he asked, "What did you just say?" I replied, looking out at the Chicago skyline glittering in the night, that starting today, your useless son is finally growing up. The next day, the atmosphere in the Sullivan Group boardroom was suffocating. I stood at the head of the massive, oval table, a presentation for the Nexus investment projected behind me. The directors who had built this empire alongside my father sat around the table, their eyes filled with scrutiny, doubt, and a poorly hidden contempt. My father, Warren Sullivan, sat at the head, his face like carved stone. Davis, do you have any idea what you were talking about? My uncle, Howard Sullivan, was the first to strike. He was my father's cousin and had spent years coveting my position as heir. $50 million on an app no one has ever heard of. Howard slammed his hand on the table. That is enough to build 3 new hotels. This is absurd. Another director chimed in. You are too young, Davis. You do not understand the risks, the director continued. This sounds like a child playing with the company's money. The opposition was relentless, which was no surprise. In their minds, I was a lost cause, a spoiled brat who only knew how to party and cause trouble. I did not argue. Instead, I calmly clicked the remote. The presentation shifted to a set of cold, hard numbers. Gentlemen, look at this. This is the profit growth curve for our offline assets, including hotels, malls, and theaters over the last 3 years. I pointed to the nearly flat line. The brick-and-mortar empire we are so proud of has hit a ceiling. Consumer habits are shifting, and the new generation prefers to spend their money online. We are being slowly left behind by the times. The room went quiet. They had seen the data before, but no one, especially not me, had ever laid it out so bluntly. What we need is a gateway, a bridge between our massive offline assets and online traffic. Nexus is that gateway. I raised my voice slightly. $50 million is not buying an app. It is buying the next 10 years of the Sullivan Group survival. The future is too vague, Howard scoffed. All I know is that our cash flow is tight, and this is like throwing money into a black hole. Who takes responsibility if it fails? All eyes turned to me. I met their gaze without flinching. I will, I answered firmly. I pulled a stack of documents from my briefcase and placed them on the table. This is a transfer agreement for all my personal assets, including real estate, supercars, and stocks, totaling roughly $60 million. If Nexus fails, it all goes to the company, and I walk away with nothing. The room became so silent you could hear a pin drop. They never expected the playboy who once spent hundreds of thousands on handbags to please a woman would bet his entire net worth on a vision of the future. Even my father's stoic expression cracked. He studied the agreement for a long time before looking up. Are you sure? I am sure, I replied without hesitation. I knew this was more than just a business gamble. It was an oath to my father and the board. I was no longer the useless Davis they once knew, and I wanted them to know I was truly determined. My father remained silent, the air in the room heavy enough to be cut with a knife. Just then, the door burst open and a panicked secretary rushed in. "Mr. Sullivan, there's a situation downstairs. 2 people have." Before she could finish, 2 figures stormed into the room. Leading the way was Ryan Harrison, his face wrapped in bandages and his eyes burning with the rage of a stray dog. Isabella Montgomery followed behind him, her face streaked with tears. They had barged directly into the Sullivan Group board meeting. The directors frowned, their looks of disgust returning instantly. Their expressions seemed to say that a leopard cannot change its spots and that trouble would always follow me. Howard sneered. "Well, Davis, it seems your love life is more entertaining than your investment strategy." I ignored him and stared coldly at the intruders. "Davis," Ryan roared, pointing a finger at me. "Are you even a man? Isabella was attacked, and you are hiding here like a coward. You even blocked her? How can you be so heartless?" Isabella began to sob, looking at me with those pitiful eyes. "Davis, I know I should not have called you yesterday. I did not want to be a burden, but I was so scared. Ryan got hurt saving me, and we cannot even afford the hospital bills. I just wanted to ask for your help. Why are you being so heartless?" They worked in tandem, having clearly rehearsed this scene. My refusal to play along was framed as cowardice, while their entitled demands were packaged as a debt I supposedly owed them. In my past life, they used this exact rhetoric to trap me, using guilt and a false sense of responsibility to force me to pay for their choices. The directors watched the farce unfold, some with amusement and others with contempt, but most felt embarrassed for my father. My father's face was as dark as a storm cloud, his knuckles white as he gripped the table. He valued the Sullivan name and our family reputation above all else, yet my past behavior had dragged that name through the mud. I took a deep breath. This was a mess from my past life, and I had to be the one to clean it up. I did not even glance at Ryan. My eyes were locked on Isabella. "Ms. Montgomery, do I know you?" I asked. The room went dead silent. Isabella's sobbing stopped abruptly as she stared at me, as if seeing a stranger for the first time. "Davis, what are you saying?" she stammered. "I said we do not know each other," I replied coldly. "Your medical bills and your hero have nothing to do with me. This is the Sullivan Group boardroom, not a stage for your melodrama. Now, please leave." My indifference was like a bucket of ice water dumped over them. Ryan's face turned a deep shade of purple. He had expected to hold the moral high ground and publicly shame me. He never expected that I would not even bother to play along. "Davis, you bastard." Ryan lunged at me, fist raised. "Security," I said, my voice like shards of ice. I did not even blink. 2 guards immediately rushed in and pinned the fuming Ryan to the ground. "Let me go." "You coward," he screamed. Ryan struggled wildly, cursing me for hiding behind others. Isabella panicked and grabbed my arm, tears streaming down her face. "Davis, please do not be like this," she begged. "Ryan was just trying to help me. You cannot treat him like this. You were not like this before." Before. I finally looked up at her, a sarcastic smile playing on my lips. The old Davis was a fool who thought a sincere heart would be returned in kind. And the result? All he got was constant demands and endless trouble. "Isabella, your damsel in distress act is over." I pulled my arm away and stepped back, drawing a clear line between us. "Isabella, from today on, do not bring your damsel in distress act to me again. You no longer have a role in my life. If you want someone to pay your bills, go to him," I said, gesturing toward Ryan. "He is your hero, right? Let him take responsibility for your life. And as for you, Ryan," I turned to him, my gaze freezing. "I do not care if you were Special Forces or the Chosen One. This is my turf. If you ever cause trouble at the Sullivan Group again, I will show you that in this city, capital is far more powerful than your fists." I turned my back on them and faced my father and the board. Their expressions wavered between shock and curiosity. "Gentlemen, I apologize for that rude interruption," I said. "That little episode was just a loose end from my past. and it has been handled. Dad, now we can continue discussing the future of Nexus and the Sullivan Group. I handed the agreement to my father once more. My calm and decisive handling of the situation stunned everyone in the room. They had never seen me like this. No temper tantrums, no panic, just cold efficiency in the face of a crying ex and an aggressive rival. I was like a surgeon removing a tumor, cutting it clean without hesitation. It was cold but effective. My father watched me, his eyes a storm of shock and scrutiny. Beneath the surface, I saw a hint of relief and a touch of pride. He remained silent for a long time before picking up a pen and signing my proposal. He looked up, his voice steady and powerful as he addressed the room. I approve Davis's plan, he announced. The $50 million will come from my personal account. If it succeeds, the profits go to the company. If it fails, I take the loss. The matter is settled. Howard's face soured as if he had swallowed a fly, but he could not say a word. Ryan and Isabella, still being held by security at the door, heard everything. Their anger turned into pure shock and confusion. They could not understand how their attempt to ruin my reputation had instead solidified my authority and won back my father's trust. I watched them being dragged away, my heart as calm as a cold sea. This was only the beginning. Ryan Harrison and Isabella Montgomery, I would reclaim everything you owed me and the Sullivan family with interest. After the meeting, my father called me into his office. He sat behind his mahogany desk, the man who had led the Sullivan Group for over 20 years. For the first time, he looked at me as an equal. "You have truly changed," he said with a hint of emotion. "You pour me a cup of tea. Everyone has to grow up eventually, Dad," I said, taking a sip. As for Isabella Montgomery and Ryan Harrison, he asked, "How do you plan to handle them?" "They're just clowns, Dad. They are not worth my time," I said. "I will just cut off their blood supply, and they will collapse on their own." In my past life, Ryan's rise was fueled by the resources I foolishly handed him. Under Isabella's influence, I had handed him resources and easy victories. My clumsy attempts to suppress him only served as stepping stones, allowing him to gain fame and wealth at my expense. This time, I would not play that game. Without a designated opponent to serve as his punching bag and ATM, I was curious to see how far the chosen man would get. I was truly curious. My father nodded, satisfied with my answer. "It is good that you see things so clearly. A Sullivan should not be held back by such nonsense. A Sullivan should not be distracted by petty romance. Although I signed a Nexus deal, the board is still uneasy. Your uncle and his cronies are watching your every move, so you must produce results quickly." "I understand," I said. "Then go do it," my father replied, patting my shoulder. "I will handle things here at home." As I left his office, I felt a surge of power I had never known before. To be trusted and held in high regard was a feeling I had never truly experienced. I would not let anyone down this time. For the next month, the office became my second home. I personally led the team in integrating Sullivan's resources into Nexus. Using my knowledge of the future, I provided a clear roadmap. First, dominate social communication, then pivot immediately into mobile payments. We would then use payments as a core to build a massive ecosystem covering gaming, e-commerce, and lifestyle services. Mark Thompson and his team began to treat me like a prophet. In every meeting, I pointed out technical blind spots and strategic flaws, offering solutions that left them speechless. They had no idea that I was simply giving them the answers they would have otherwise spent years and millions of dollars to discover through trial and error. With the full backing of the Sullivan Group's network, Nexus's user base exploded. In the first week, we hit 100,000 users. By the end of the month, we reached 3 million. When Nexus Pay launched across all Sullivan properties overnight, the tech world was stunned. Venture capitalists were lining up with blank checks, practically begging for a piece of the company. Mark rejected them all. I had told him from the start that we would not let external capital dilute our vision until we were a true giant. Through this transformation, my own reputation was completely rewritten. The former Playboy had become one of the most sought-after names in tech investment. My days were filled with meetings with industry titans and geniuses. I was so busy that the names Isabella Montgomery and Ryan Harrison were almost entirely erased from my memory. One day, Leo walked in with a strange expression. "Davis, Ms. Montgomery is downstairs again." I did not even look up from my reports. "Tell her to leave," I said. Leo hesitated. "She says she is pregnant. Tell her to get lost," I replied, my voice dropping several degrees. Leo shivered and hurried out without another word. Pregnant? Only the foolish version of me from my past life would have fallen for such a clumsy trick. I put down my report and walked to the window. Looking down, I saw Isabella standing at the entrance. She was wearing a simple white dress, looking fragile and stubborn. She had clearly calculated the angle, knowing I could see her from my office. She just stood there, staring up at me. It was pitiful. Who did she think she was? Did she really think that playing the part of the loyal lover would make me soft-hearted? I picked up the phone and called security. "There is a woman at the front entrance. If she is not gone in 5 minutes, remove her for disturbing the peace. If she does not cooperate, call the police." I hung up and closed the blinds. Out of sight, out of mind. However, I underestimated her stubbornness. She returned the next day, and the day after that. Rain or shine, she stood there like a pitiful statue, never making a scene or trying to barge in. Naturally, the office gossip began to spread. People were whispering that the woman downstairs was my ex-girlfriend and that I had dumped her while she was pregnant. Some wondered if I was really that heartless, while others just chalked it up to being a typical rich guy. The rumors eventually reached me. Leo came into my office looking troubled. "Davis, this is affecting your reputation. Maybe you should go down and talk to her." "Talk about what?" I sneered. "What is there to say to a habitual liar? If she wants to stand there and act, let her. I want to see how long she can last." I continued to ignore her and had HR issue a notice. Any employee caught gossiping about management's private life would be fired immediately. The effect was instantaneous, and the whispers stopped. Isabella's solo melodrama lasted for 2 weeks until she finally realized her efforts were futile. It was exhausting for her and completely ineffective against me. She finally stopped showing up after 2 weeks. I thought it was over, but I had underestimated the chosen one and his damsel. One day, after a video conference, I found my Uncle Howard waiting for me. He had a gloating smile on his face. "Davis, I have to congratulate you," he said. I frowned and asked what for. "Don't play dumb," he replied, patting my shoulder with a malicious grin. "Your ex-girlfriend just gave birth to a son. You're the headline news now. It looks like the next Sullivan heir is already here." My mind went blank for a moment. I pulled out my phone and opened a news app. The top headline was a shock. Billionaire heir's secret love child? It claimed a mysterious ex-girlfriend had appeared at a hospital with a newborn, potentially triggering an inheritance dispute. The photo showed Isabella holding a swaddled infant outside a hospital. She looked pale and exhausted, playing the part of the long-suffering mother. Ryan Harrison stood beside her, radiating righteous anger for the cameras. In the video, his voice was sharp. "This child belongs to Davis Sullivan. He must take responsibility for Isabella and his son. If he denies it, he'll have to answer to me." The news was like a bomb. My phone was instantly bombarded with calls, and our PR department was caught completely off guard. My father called me, demanding to know what I had done. I picked up my father's call first. "Dad, do you trust me?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. After a few seconds of silence, he replied, "I do." His words warmed my heart. "But you must clean this up immediately," he added. "I will not allow the Sullivan name to be dragged through the mud." I hung up and immediately sent Leo to investigate. Within 30 minutes, I had the answer. Isabella had indeed given birth, but at an obscure private clinic in the suburbs, not the hospital shown in the news. All the records had been deliberately suppressed. The timing of this exclusive scoop was malicious. Nexus was about to start a new round of funding, and as the majority shareholder and CSO, my reputation was the company's brand. A scandal like this could destroy investor confidence in Nexus. It was a calculated strike against my foundation. "Davis, what do we do?" Leo asked, sweating. "PR is losing control," Leo said. The media is demanding a statement. Don't panic, I replied, leaning back and tapping my fingers on the desk. If they want a media war, they will get one. I called our head of legal. Mr. Davis, draft a complaint for defamation against Ryan Harrison and Isabella Montgomery. Set the damages at $100 million. $100 million? The lawyer gasped. That is correct, I said calmly. I also want a public statement issued in my name. Keep it simple. I looked out the window, my gaze as cold as glass. The core message is this. I welcome Ms. Montgomery to a paternity test at her earliest convenience. I will cover all costs, and the entire process will be live-streamed. We will invite the top media outlets and notaries to witness it. If the child is mine, I will forfeit all my shares in the Sullivan Group and walk away with nothing. But if the child is not mine, I paused, a cold sneer forming on my lips. Then Ms. Montgomery and Mr. Harrison should prepare for a very long stay in prison. The statement was released through official channels and went viral instantly. There were no excuses, just one direct question. Do you dare take the test? If I am the father, I lose everything. If not, you go to jail. The internet dubbed it the most hardcore response in history, and the effect was immediate. The public opinion, which had been calling me a heartless deadbeat, shifted instantly. People were saying that no one would bet their entire family fortune unless they were absolutely certain. People were suddenly more interested in the drama than the accusations. If the child was not mine, then Isabella and Ryan were guilty of blatant extortion. That was no small matter. Suddenly, the pressure was entirely on them. I had set the trap, and they had no way out. If they refused the test, it would be a public confession of guilt. If they agreed, I would get exactly what I wanted. I gave them 3 days. During that time, they vanished from the public eye while their social media accounts were flooded with insults. I continued my routine, attending meetings and closing deals for Nexus as if the storm did not exist. Just when everyone thought they would back down, Ryan Harrison finally spoke to the media. We accept the test, he declared. We have a clear conscience. Isabella has suffered enough, and we will get justice for her and her son. His righteous act reignited the media's frenzy. The paternity test of the century was officially on. It was held at the city's most prestigious forensic center, which was surrounded by reporters and onlookers. Isabella and Ryan were already there when I arrived. Isabella held the infant, her face pale as she avoided my gaze. Ryan stood protectively in front of her, glaring at me as if I were a monster. Davis Sullivan, you finally showed up, he sneered. Likewise, I replied. I did not even look at him, instead asking the technician if we could begin. Under the gaze of dozens of cameras, samples were taken from both me and the infant. The process was entirely transparent. The technician announced that the results would be ready in 24 hours. I nodded and turned to leave, but Ryan called out to me. Davis, do you dare to raise the stakes? I stopped, curious. How so? I asked. If the child is yours, you do more than just give up your fortune, he said. You have to kneel and apologize to Isabella in front of the whole country to atone for your crimes. Fine, I agreed instantly. And if the child is not mine? Ryan hesitated, clearly not expecting me to agree so easily. He looked at Isabella, who nodded confidently to encourage him. He grit his teeth and shouted that if he was wrong, he would cut off his own arm and leave the city forever. The crowd gasped, and the reporters went into a frenzy. Camera flashes went off like a storm. This was no longer just a test. It was a gamble on dignity, the future, and even physical safety. I looked at him and smiled. Deal, I said. I turned and walked away without looking back. Ryan was a pathetic fool. He truly believed he was the protagonist of the world, which made him arrogant and reckless enough to think every trap would favor him. He had no idea that I already had the answer. The 24-hour wait was torture for the public, but for me, it was just another day at the office. In my spare time, I even intercepted another opportunity from Ryan's future. There was a site in the West Loop that was once part of a Gilded Age estate. In my past life, Ryan had bought it on a whim and discovered a hidden vault filled with priceless art and jewelry. That windfall had been his startup capital. This time, I had the Sullivan Group by the land at a price the city could not refuse. When our team discovered the vault, the entire company was in shock. I knew this was only the beginning. The next afternoon, the paternity results were announced at a packed press conference. Under the supervision of a notary, the head of the center opened the sealed envelope. The air in the room was thick. Ryan, Isabella, and I sat on the stage, keeping our distance. Isabella gripped the child, her face pale with nerves, while Ryan looked smug and gave me a provocative smile. I simply smiled back. The director began to read the results in a calm, professional voice, stating that the probability of me being the biological father was 0.0001%. Paternity is excluded, he announced. The words echoed through the room, followed by a brief silence before the entire venue erupted in chaos. People were shouting in disbelief, wondering whose child it actually was. It was clear that Isabella and Ryan were finished, their reputations destroyed beyond repair. Every camera in the room turned toward Isabella and Ryan. Their faces were as white as sheets. Ryan's smug grin vanished, replaced by a look of pure horror. "Impossible!" he screamed, rushing to the podium and grabbing the report. "This is fake. You must have been bribed." He tampered with the results. Isabella collapsed on the floor, sobbing hysterically. The head of the lab looked at them with a dark expression. "Mr. Harrison, calm down," the official said. "Our results are legally binding and beyond doubt. You are slandering our professional reputation." "I do not believe it," Ryan screamed. Ryan had lost his mind. I stood up and walked over to him, looking down at his pathetic state. "Can't handle the loss?" I asked quietly. "It was you. You did this," he howled. I laughed. "Ryan, do you still not understand? From the very beginning, this was a trap tailored specifically for you," I said, my voice carrying through the room. "You thought you were playing me, but you were the one being led by the nose. I watched you climb higher and higher, just so the fall would hurt more." I turned to the excited reporters. "I'm sure you all have one question. Who is the real father?" I snapped my fingers, and my lawyer entered the room accompanied by 2 police officers. He was holding another document. "Since Mr. Harrison doubts the first report, let us look at the second," I said, holding the papers up for everyone to see. It was another paternity test, this time comparing the infant's DNA with Ryan Harrison's. My voice was cold as I read the results from a second independent lab. The probability of Ryan Harrison being the biological father is 99.9999%. The evidence was ironclad, and the room erupted into chaos. People were disgusted, realizing that Ryan had used his own girlfriend and son as props in an extortion scheme. It was a sickening revelation. They wondered what kind of person could do such a thing, and many noted that Isabella deserved an Oscar for her performance. Ryan stood frozen, unable to process the reality of the situation. The color drained from his face as he turned to Isabella, who was still on the floor. "Isabella, what is this?" he stammered, his voice shaking. Isabella avoided his eyes and shook her head, swearing she did not know. "You did not know?" Ryan roared, grabbing her by the collar and lifting her off the floor. "How could you not know?" he screamed. Isabella was incoherent, stammering about being drunk that night. "Enough," I said, cutting off their pathetic drama. "I have no interest in your private affairs. Now, it is time to settle the score." I looked at Ryan's right arm. "Mr. Harrison, do you remember our bet?" Ryan began to shake with fear. "You promised to cut off your own arm," I reminded him. "Davis, that was just talk. You cannot do this," he pleaded. "I cannot," I sneered. "When you were slandering me on camera and dragging my family's name through the mud, did you think about what you could or could not do? You tried to ruin my life. It is too late for regrets." My words cut into him like knives. He looked around the room, but he only saw faces filled with disgust and contempt. He was finished. His reputation, his future, and his romance were all gone. He let out a roar of despair, pushed Isabella aside, and tried to bolt for the exit. "Stop him," I said calmly. The guards were ready and easily pinned him to the ground. He screamed and struggled, but it was no use. 2 officers stepped forward and handcuffed him. "Mr. Harrison, Ms. Montgomery, You are under arrest for defamation and attempted extortion. The evidence is solid. Please come with us." The sound of the handcuffs clicking shut echoed through the room. Their fate was sealed. As I watched them being led away, I felt no joy, only a calm sense of satisfaction. In my past life, they had watched me fall into hell from their high perch. This time, I simply let them experience the same fall. The farce was finally over. Next, it was time to deal with the man who had been watching from the shadows, my uncle, Howard Sullivan. After the scandal was settled, my status in the company skyrocketed. The directors who once looked down on me now treated me with a mix of respect and fear. They finally realized that the Sullivan heir was no longer a weakling, but a patient and calculating predator. My father showed his trust by putting me in charge of the company's most important divisions, real estate and investment. I was now officially the second most powerful person in the Sullivan Group. Once I had the power, I began a thorough cleanup. I ordered a surprise audit of the overseas divisions managed by Howard, and the results were shocking. Over the years, Howard had used his position to set up a dozen shell companies overseas. Through fake transactions and inflated costs, he had embezzled nearly $500 million. The money had ended up in his and his son's private accounts. In my past life, this fraud was not discovered until the company was facing bankruptcy, but this time, I was ahead of the game. By then, it had been too late. In this life, I was determined to make him return every cent. The night I received the final audit report, I did not go to my father immediately. Instead, I invited Howard to my penthouse. It was our first private meeting since my return. "Davis, my boy," he said, walking in with a fake, fatherly smile. "What is so important that you called your old uncle over so late?" he asked, acting like a caring relative. "Sit down, uncle," I said, pouring him a whiskey and pushing a thick stack of documents toward him. "Take a look at this," I said. "What is it?" he asked, picking them up. As he read the first page, his smile vanished instantly, replaced by a look of pure shock. His hands began to shake, and sweat broke out on his forehead. "This is slander," he shouted, slamming the papers down. "These are all lies. We both know these are real, uncle," I said with frightening calmness. "I'm sure the SEC and the FBI would be very interested in reviewing these documents." He pointed a trembling finger at me. "Davis, I am your uncle. How dare you do this to me?" "Uncle," I laughed, the sound cold and hollow. "When the media was attacking me, you paid trolls to fuel the fire. Is it your idea of family? When I bet everything on the company's future, you tried to sabotage me at every turn, hoping I would fail. Is that how you show care for your nephew? Howard, let's be honest. You have only ever wanted one thing, this company. You think my father is too old to lead. You thought I was an easy target. You dreamed of pushing me out to make room for your useless sons." He flinched with every word I spoke. His face turned a sickly pale. "I am giving you two choices," I said, raising two fingers. "First, I hand this report over to the authorities. You and your sons will spend the rest of your lives in federal prison. Second," I paused, looking him in the eye, "you sign over all your shares in the Sullivan Group. Resign from all your positions and leave the country with whatever money you have left. Never come back." Howard collapsed into the sofa, looking completely defeated. He knew he had lost. After a lifetime of schemes, he had been taken down by the person he underestimated most. "I choose the second option," he whispered. "Wise choice," I said, standing up. "I expect the signed agreement on my desk by 9 tomorrow morning." I went upstairs, leaving him alone in the silence to process his defeat. With my uncle gone, the internal obstacles vanished. My father and I began a major restructuring of the company, selling off underperforming offline assets. We funneled that capital into the tech sector, using Nexus as the core of our new strategy. I pushed the Sullivan Group to invest in projects that were considered extremely risky at the time. We invested in drones, electric vehicles, green energy, and AI chips. To others, it looked like a gamble, but every single investment paid off spectacularly. The Sullivan Group transformed from a traditional real estate firm into a global tech and venture capital giant. My name, Davis Sullivan, became a legend in the business world. No one called me a useless heir anymore. Instead, I was known as a legendary investor with a Midas touch. At the peak of my career, someone from my past reappeared. After a charity gala, a figure in a server's uniform jumped in front of my car. It was Isabella Montgomery. She had lost a lot of weight, and the years had not been kind to her. Her youthful beauty was gone, replaced by exhaustion. "Davis," she said, her eyes filled with guilt, regret, and a desperate hope. "What is it?" I asked politely but distantly, as if speaking to a stranger. "I wanted to apologize," she said, looking down. "For everything. I was wrong. There is no need for apologies," I said. "Now, I'm going home." "Wait," she cried, leaning against the car door. "Davis, I know I was terrible. Ryan is a monster. After he got out of prison, he kicked me and the child out. He gambles all day and is drowning in debt." She sobbed as she told me how miserable her life had become and how much she regretted her choices. I listened without feeling anything. Was her life miserable? Perhaps, but it was the path she had chosen. The moment she and Ryan decided to use me as a stepping stone, their fate was sealed. "Are you telling me this to get sympathy?" I asked. "Or are you hoping for a check?" My bluntness made her flush with embarrassment. "No, that is not it," she stammered. "I just wanted you to know that I finally realized you were the only one who was truly good to me." "Truly good?" I laughed. "Isabella, stop acting. You do not miss me. You miss the lifestyle I used to provide for you. You only realize this because your hero could not give you the life you wanted." My words tore away her last bit of dignity, and her face went pale. "We have nothing more to say," I said, rolling up the window. I told the driver to go. In the rearview mirror, I saw her chase the car for a few steps before collapsing on the ground, sobbing. I looked away and closed my eyes. Isabella Montgomery and Ryan Harrison, names that once dominated my life, were now nothing more than dust on the road. My life had moved on, while they remained stuck in the past. Another 5 years passed, and the world changed completely as the mobile internet reshaped society. Under my leadership, Nexus rode the wave and eventually went public on the Nasdaq. Its valuation skyrocketed past $1 trillion, making it one of the world's largest tech giants. The Sullivan Group's valuation also grew exponentially thanks to our early investments. I officially took over as chairman from my father, becoming the true leader of the conglomerate. I had reached the pinnacle of power and wealth, a height I never could have imagined in my past life. But it was lonely at the top, my days filled with endless meetings and social obligations. I was always surrounded by people, yet I had no one to truly talk to. Sometimes, after working late, I would look out at the city lights and feel an overwhelming sense of loneliness. But I had no regrets. This was the path I chose. Compared to the despair of my past life, this loneliness was a luxury. One evening, my car passed through a rundown neighborhood and stopped at a red light. I looked out the window and saw a greasy little diner on the corner. I saw a hunched man with a scarred face and an empty sleeve serving burgers. It was Ryan Harrison. His right sleeve hung empty, swinging as he moved. Behind the counter, a haggard Isabella Montgomery was flipping burgers while shouting at a crying child. It was a grim scene. That woman was Isabella Montgomery. They had ended up in a place like this. I looked at the man who once thought he was destined for greatness and the woman who played the damsel in distress. They were now haggard and worn down by life. This was the end of their epic romance. Without a villain to fight or a benefactor to fund them, their love had failed. Their fairy tale could not survive the reality of bills and daily life. The light turned green, and I moved on without looking back. Their story was over for me. When I got home, my father was in the study looking at an old photo of himself and my late mother. "Dad, you are still up?" I asked. "Davis," he said, putting down the photo. "Sit with me. What is on your mind?" "It is nothing," he said with a sad smile. "Today is the anniversary of your mother's passing. I was thinking of her. I felt a surge of guilt for having forgotten the date while focused on my career." "I am sorry, Dad," I said. "Do not be sorry," he replied, patting my hand. "I wanted to talk to you about something else. You are not getting any younger, and it is time to think about starting a family. I'm very busy, Dad, I started. I know, he interrupted. But you cannot hold a career at night. A home should not be so empty. I'm getting old, and I want to see the Sullivan legacy continue. I remained silent. I was nearly 30, and I had achieved everything I set out to do. But my heart still felt empty. Was it the trauma of the past, or had I just grown used to the silence? I did not know. I will think about it, Dad. I promise. I walked out onto the terrace and looked up at the stars. I pulled out my phone and opened an old photo album. It was a photo of Isabella from my past life, smiling under a cherry blossom tree. Back then, I thought she was my entire world. I had been like a moth to a flame, and I had been burned. I stared at the photo for a long time before finally hitting delete. I confirmed the deletion, and the image vanished. In that moment, I felt a weight lift from my chest. I took a deep breath and looked up at the night sky. I realized that I was not afraid to love. I was just waiting for the right person. I wanted someone who could stand beside me as an equal, looking at the same horizon. Whether I meet her tomorrow or in 10 years, it does not matter. I have all the time in the world, and I have finally learned to be patient. My true life is just beginning. When you stop being a supporting character in someone else's story, you realize how incredible it feels to be the lead in your own. As for love, there is no rush. The real thrill comes from building your own empire. Do not waste your life living out someone else's script. True awakening is realizing that you do not owe anyone a self-sacrificing ending. When you stop living for others and start investing in yourself, you realize that the best revenge is not destruction, but simply moving on until their existence no longer matters to you. I hope you choose yourself when you hit that fork in the road. Do not fall for the trap of being a martyr. Being the hero of your own story is the greatest feeling in the world.